Hello, welcome to Fundraising Refreshments. This is our time together, 20 minutes every 2 weeks or so, when we gather for some fundraising tips, tricks, and hacks, and here to have a good time. And today we're gonna cover how to build stories around your content. Now we are gonna cover that. That's gonna be a slice of what we review today. But really, what I'm most excited about is that what we're ultimately, the core of what we're going to talk about is crafting stories for the future of fundraising. Sounds a lot more exciting, doesn't it? That's because it is. So let me first introduce myself. My name is Billy Vaudry. I'm Senior Vice President, Lead Group Creative Director here at RKD. I've been with RKD roughly 15 years. I've been in the business of fundraising since 1990. I took a little hiatus to be a wrestling coach for a couple of years, but lessons learned there do apply in direct response fundraising for sure. I will tell you that fundraising and marketing for nonprofits might seem like a fairly predictable or dull job to some because it's primarily in an office, but I have been all around the world as a result of this position, and I'm grateful for it. And the expectations of my life, I exceeded at 35. So now I'm playing with house money for the last 20 years or so and having a great time doing it. So let's just jump in right here. Why stories are important, specific to what it is that we all do together in this wonderful world of fundraising and marketing for nonprofits and making the world a better place. I'm going to tell you some things right now that you likely already know. Stories evoke emotions, okay? And that is what fundamentally what it is that we're all about. Our brothers and sisters out there in the corporate America who are in marketing and advertising have a wonderful item to put out there called a product. It's something that can be exchanged and something tangible. We, on the other hand, on behalf of our clients or on behalf of your organization, have less tangible items to put out there to convince people to have a financial exchange. Not solely that, and we'll get into that, but nonetheless, we have to do a great deal more in order to convince people to part with their funds for a greater cause. And so that's where emotions come in, right? And that's where stories are able to do that in a way that facts typically cannot. Stories are memorable. Wow, what an understatement. The power of stories, let's just take a look at it from this perspective. We were telling stories as a human race before we even had words, before we had dialogue or dialect to describe things. We were acting it out in front of a fire, and those very stories were passed along from family to family to generation. Paintings on caves telling stories and these kinds of things. It's in our DNA. It's in our DNA to tell stories. It's in our DNA to listen to the stories. We remember them. They're meaningful. Why? Ultimately, because back to the first point, they trigger an emotion. Stories inspire. Just think about the last movie you've seen, the last book you've read, where you felt inspired in some form or fashion. I'll tell you a little something about myself. Rocky came out in 1976. I was 9 years old, and my mom took me to see it in the theater straight from baseball practice. So I still had my cleats on, and Rocky still remains one of my favorite movies of all time. I was so inspired by Rocky that I insisted I run home. Now, let me just tell you something. That was 8 miles, and my mom followed me in the car. I was 9 years old, running in a baseball uniform and cleats, all because of that movie. That's inspiration, folks. And so we can do the same by the stories that we tell, how we tell them, and get people inspired to move in a different direction in terms of how they support the organizations that we work for. And then stories, of course, are an amazing way to show the proof of generosity and prayers in action. Okay, We can tell facts, and facts have their place, by the way. And we can get in a little bit today about how actually a block of facts may be an organization story, that donors don't necessarily respond to the individual life change, but what they do respond to is the research victories that are taking place and the stats involved with that. And that's legit. That is a story unto itself. And so, but indeed, for the sake of this conversation right here, by and large, stories are proof of impact. And so what do we mean by that? For those who are new to this game, well, what we mean is that an individual changed life, and that can be in the form of, let's just say, somebody who is experiencing homelessness, and he or she goes into a rescue mission, receives a good hot meal, understands that hot meal has made them feel better inside. Maybe they'll stay the night, and in that maybe they wake up the next day feeling better than they did yesterday, and they string enough of those better days together in order to join a program and ultimately change their life. That's proof of impact. The same could be said of a village in the most remote areas of Africa that has been stricken by drought, for instance. And so an organization comes in and digs a well, which not only gives them fulfills immediate need, but a long-term need. And as that well is also used to help irrigate gardens. And so as children are being food and don't have to worry about water, then they are able to be educated and make a better life for not only themselves, but then that expands to the village. We're going to get into more of this kind of storytelling a little bit later on, but suffice to say that that is proof of impact in a way that can be so powerful if we do it right. And then let's see, who doesn't love a good story? Okay, so let's just be transparent here, and I'm gonna be a little blunt. What we do in terms of our storytelling, it's got to entertain. Okay, people at the heart of an exchange, and no matter what the medium, okay, they want to be entertained, to use that word loosely, and that is to say that they to be moved, to be captured, to be focused just on what it is that they're seeing, reading, or listening to. And so, and that's not a set it and forget it exercise. As if there's creatives in the room here today, which I know there are, we have to work very hard to reach that level of engagement, and highly encourage us to do so, especially in this day and age, because we have quite a few more tools and a much bigger canvas to do so. So let's get into that a little bit, shall we? So what's the story for the future state of fundraising? Whatever it needs to be. And here's what I mean by that. I remember the days, as you do too, some of you likely do, is when what we had to tell an organization story was in the form of a direct mail piece or a phone with a cord. And there was only so much that you could do in either one. Let's focus on direct mail for the moment. And that is what I'm talking about, traditional, okay? And so there was, as we all know, that our direct mail fundraising offers and stories need to fit on the head of a pin. Direct mail appeal letters, if you want them to raise money, they need to focus on that one purpose. But at the time, I'm talking about late 80s, early 90s, the desire of many organizations were to do a both and, or at least attempt a both and. And what I mean by that is to also maybe, yeah, we want to raise money, but we also want to talk about our upcoming walk run or our upcoming gala and these kinds of things. And so the stories that we were telling were becoming diluted. But there is a wonderful world in which we operate now that has, like I mentioned before, a great broad palette with all these wonderful tools where we can tell all kinds of stories in different ways. And that's what that's what I want to get into on this slide right here, is we have the traditional approach where we tell a story with a beginning, a middle, and not an end, but a new beginning. And for our purposes, there is no end. It's a beginning, middle, and then what would typically be an end is a new beginning for the stories that we tell. And then let me tell you, A story can be a quote. If we shift to a different medium, right? If we shift to digital, where the quote within the context of who the organization is and who the audience is, and the audience, this one would be an audience who is familiar with the organization, a quote, a well defined and refined quote within the context of what else is going on surrounding it can tell the entirety of the story. I found new life at organization. I was given a second chance thanks to organization. Within the context of what that individual is experiencing, that is the story. The donor will fill in the blanks for us. And we can do that now. You wouldn't send a direct mail piece with just that quote. It would be too little. It wouldn't have any context. But in this great, wonderful world of digital that we have, we obviously can do that. A photo, same thing. Think about light boxes, social posts, etc. Just where it's really just you have one very brief chance, just one punch in order to express. Well, that photo can tell the story. A photo with a great cut line or headline or CTA, if with done well, with diligence and focus, okay, can tell the entirety of a story. And what I wanted to say is far too often we do get boggled down in the tyranny of the urgent. And it's not enough to throw a line of copy and an okay photo out there. We need the photo that tells the story. We need the copy that supports that story. It does take focus and it does take work, but it's worth it, right? And then, of course, all things social, any sort of social post can tell the story, be a long story. It doesn't even need a beginning, middle, and end. You can be in a social post, you can begin with the end, start with follow up with the middle, and with the beginning, Taratina style. It sort of really rules off there, but equally as effective because it has its purpose and its place. So let's talk about what at least we consider the fundraising for our burgeoning current state and fundraising for the future. And this is omni-channel storytelling. This does not discount in any way our current form that has been proven for decades over decades of storytelling and where offer comes into play. And by the way, the title of this, the original title of this presentation, by no means is intended to dilute the power and importance of the offer. Offer still remains king. However, offer is not enough, and we can get into that in just a little bit. That the story our story and how we tell it needs to be to supplement what has been largely perhaps an exchange. And we need something in the form of story to be able to further engage our donors beyond a transaction, right? So I hope that makes sense. So let's just talk about a little bit about our traditional way of storytelling within the context of fundraising and marketing for nonprofits, right? So we would typically begin with an offer. Nothing wrong with that. Let's say it's a price per meal, price for a Bible, or a sponsorship, child sponsorship. We have the offer, and so okay, so what are we going to build around that offer? Well, offer drives packaging, and really rarely would be the other way around. And so and by packaging, I also am including some what would be now old school terminology, direct mail and email. And so what it is that what are going to be the container, if you will, for this messaging and this offer. And then we have to consider the atmospherics. And so what those are is what's going on around in a donor or prospect's life when this package or email hits their inbox or the traditional mailbox. And so that would be things like weather. This is extreme weather, hot or cold, or holidays. the traditional Easter, Thanksgiving, Christmas. That gets considered, and that'll get woven into the tapestry of what we're building here. And then we have to find the perfect story that speaks to the atmospherics and also is supports the kind of packaging, and obviously something that is proof in the pudding of why the offer is so important. And again, hey, listen, nothing wrong with that. That's going to continue for some time, right? Particularly in certain mediums like direct mail. But listen, we're talking about omni-channel storytelling, and that is a nuanced but important difference. And so let's get through that a little bit. So this is what I'm fired up about. We begin with content and or story. Okay, so we have indeed before us let's just say an amazing story, whether that be an individual's life or a story of something that's bigger, of a mass of people whose lives were changed in a meaningful way, depending on who you are, what you do, and what your audience responds to. That's going to help define what that may be, and I hope that you can fill in the blanks for the sake of this conversation. So then we have this wonderful content. We start with content. Content is indeed king. And then we start talking about, okay, well, how does this work in the various channels we have? Because telling the full story in one channel that might be, that is cold, I'm gonna call it cold, as just so you know, I'm gonna call direct mail cold, as coldest medium we have. Video, TV, that arguably the hottest. I'm a direct mail geek. I'm a direct response geek in all channels. So just know that I have a love for it, and I'm not being critical of it. It's just a fact. We can only do so much. So are you going to tell this full story in direct mail? No, you can tell a slice of it, but that story isn't over, right? We're going to get into that. So we're going to use some of it, more of it in digital, etc. And then we're going to talk about, okay, what are the offers or calls to action that are appropriate for the different channels and the different audiences, right? So we're going to consider that, and then we're going to spread that out across our spectrum of tools for communicating. And then we're going to consider, okay, well, what does this look like, and what are the vehicles in which this is delivered to our audiences? And that is indeed the packaging, both in all channels, okay? And then we talk about, okay, well, before we begin creating this, we absolutely need to consider the POV of our audience and the atmospherics. What are they seeing? It's blazingly hot. We need to be keenly aware of that. Or it's Christmas. Let's not be tone deaf to that. In fact, let's capitalize on that, leverage it as much as we can. So what I presented to you is a traditional line and our omni-channel line. You can see the similarities between the two, but I hope you also can understand the distinct approaches between the two as well. So let me give you an example of what I just described. Our content for our omni-channel campaign is Marcus. His story is so robust and so meaningful and powerful. We can't stop telling it in just one channel. So what did we do? We did tell Marcus's story in a direct mail appeal. Why wouldn't we? Marcus had a football scholarship. Made a few bad choices, ends up living out of his car, eating from trash bins. Marcus is then introduced to a rescue mission. He comes in, they provide him the basics, right? Food, shelter, care. He enters the recovery program. His life is transformed. This is how you do it. This is how we do it in direct mail. Super appropriate. But there's more to the story. It's how Marcus came to the rescue mission. Now, in a direct mail appeal, that's a little less relevant for that medium, right? But guess what? In the world of digital, we can paint with a much broader brush, because it's interesting It's entertaining. It's captivating. It's dramatic. So let me tell you a little bit about this. So Marcus was trying to find some food from a dumpster outside of a bread shop. A woman who was working next door to the bread shop ends her shift. She gets some bread. She walks out. She sees Marcus. She gives him the loaf of bread. She's moved by his conditions. They begin talking. She understands that Marcus needs help. Marcus is obviously somebody who sincerely wants some help. So what happens? She then introduces him to her friend, Pastor Jake, who knows of this recovery center where Marcus gets some help. And guess what? Marcus and Jake sit down. They have a conversation. Jake brings him to the recovery center, where he changes his life as a result of the gifts of friends, moving through the actions of the center, etc. And guess what? The story's not over yet. When he does recover, he reaches back out to Kathy, meets with her husband. Now he's a longtime friend of their family. The story comes all the way full circle, right? And so, are we going to put that in just one piece of direct mail? No, it's not relevant. It's not going to be effective. But can we do that through a myriad of tools that we have at our disposal? Absolutely, and yes. So this is just a wonderful, exciting time. Like, again, I'm just going to go back to when, even if you had this wonderful information, there's really nothing that you could do with it effectively for direct response fundraising. But now we certainly can, and our calls to action can be different. We support organizations, and you may be a part of an organization where not all your calls to action need to be financially based. It could be engagement. It can be education. It can be instructive. It can be meaningful on a level that is beyond fundraising. And we can use every bit of this content, this wonderful, glorious, motivating content to move donors in ways that we need them to. And by the way, the way that donors want to be, they want to be included. We just need to give them a reason. I have a good colleague and friend who says that that generosity is infinite, and I believe that. What we need to do is serve up the plate by which the donors and prospects will be able to participate in what it is that we have to offer. And we have to do it in the right medium, right audience, and right channel. And that's where story comes in, right? We can just spread it out and inspire in so many different ways. So let's talk about extending our story arc. And so this is where, if you'll just recall our traditional way of fundraising, or at least a storytelling within a fundraising appeal, and what we are experiencing is a bit of a sea change in terms of how we do that. And so let me just explain that in the context of, I'm going to get back to price point and offer again. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm going to follow up right now. So I'm going to use a rescue mission as an example, okay? Because it's very basic and simple. There was a day, which many of you will recall, and if you're not familiar with rescue mission fundraising, I hope you can find a way to apply this to what it is that you have in your experience. But in any case, for so many years and decades, it was enough to say in a rescue mission appeal, basically, Thanksgiving is just around the corner. Every Thanksgiving meal costs $1.25. No Americans should go hungry at this time. Won't you please give and help change a life today? That was it. Now you could have a change life story or some other content in there, but basically that was your message, and it would do wonderfully well. Okay. Well, we're seeing that those days are weaning quickly, and there needs to be more of the story. And we are extending the story arc for nearly all of RKD's clients, but I'll tell you where it's most pronounced currently is in our rescue mission work, food banks, children's hospital, and healthcare. And so what does this look like? What this looks like is the story of one changed life. We're familiar with that, right? we're talking, then we'll extend it to how that changed life impacts a family. Now, listen, that might not be something that we traditionally tell in our fundraising and marketing. So the persons whose lives has changed, it may be somebody who has gotten sober through a rescue mission. It might be somebody who's been struggling with breast cancer and is now and treatment is over and now is on a road to a good recovery. That family is impacted, inspired, moved, and then that reshapes a neighborhood. And so let's say, wow, I've only seen Charlie one way, and that's been high and or drunk, and now I'm seeing him clean shaven in a coat and slacks, and it looks like he's employed. What a crazy thing that and dramatic thing has happened there. Or maybe it's Kathy who has been struggling with breast cancer, and the whole neighborhood has known that and been behind her and has done some social fundraising, had some other things, supportive things for her, and now we're unified as a neighborhood around her, and how then that broadens out to transforming the entirety of community, because it just takes one story of hope, one real life story. The proof is in the pudding. You think it's impactful in how we tell stories, think about it in a real life scenario. But so taking those real life scenarios, finding that content that tells that story, and then communicating that to donors through the appropriate channels to the appropriate audiences, is how we are extending the story arc. So in other words, when we're telling the story, we used to be able to just tell one changed life, and that was enough of the story. We are finding now, by the way, I don't make up the rules, the donors do. And they're raising their hands or not raising their hands, and by their non-participation saying, we need more. We need more than the offer. I need more evidence of what my investment's going to do, not only in the life of that one individual, but I need to know that is actually going to have a meaningful ripple effect. And that's what I'm talking about today, in terms of this extending the story arc. Listen, you got to work. Listen, creatives, you got to work hard to get that resource. It's a needle in a haystack. But and organizations, it's important that you support this effort for your own benefit and for your donors' benefit, because what a great and wonderful way we're able to tell them and expose to them all or most of what it is, all the wonderful things that you do, and still be able to engage them in such a way that they are inspired with generosity, so that you can continue doing what you're doing from day to day. Listen, here's another great example in animal welfare, and this is fascinating to me because it's new in terms of a widespread need. Okay, our typical storyline there would be, okay, the pet is rescued from the streets. Oh, that's great. And then the pet is adopted. That is something that we communicate often, right? And we want to continue doing that. And the pet's life is changed. Now, we may or may not have the story resource to support that. It's often just as well we could end up, the pet is adopted and case is closed, mission accomplished, money is being raised. Well, guess what? We're needing to tell a little more of the story as resource supports, that the pet's life has changed. Okay, that's great. So before and after pictures, we're all accustomed to that. That's nothing new. Or the story of just, the ticks and fleas and the skin conditions, all that are now cured, and it's a much healthier looking dog or cat or what have you, with a little more weight, etc. But guess what? There's another story to be told, and that's the story of how that pet is impacting the adoptive family. So much so that one has to wonder who's saving who. And so we are indeed telling that story, again, as a resource supports, and we are actively generating that content, or not generating, but trying to find that content, because it is such a wonderful story to tell. But it's the stories that our donors and our prospects are wanting to hear. It's a full circle story the a broadening impact of the donor's gift, and necessary for this day and age when we have all these wonderful tools and technology to tell the stories. Now, listen, I know what some of you are thinking. What about AI? That's a different presentation. But I will tell you this: as you may have heard before, AI does not replace this, but those who use AI are going to replace those who don't. And so it does have a role. I won't go into details, but I just wanted to address what may be somewhat of an elephant in the room. It's part of our conversations, as it should be. Personally, I only see this helping with our storytelling. We still will need the human element, the actual human being with flesh and blood and emotions and experience to craft this, but AI can certainly help inform it. And so I hope you've enjoyed this session. I hope you've had your refreshment and enjoyed it as we have gone through this. We are open to any more any questions or comments. Just please put them in the chat and we'll respond to it. And I could go all day long, which I'm not. I've been warned not to by our marketing staff, who are quite strict. They are not so strict that this is a result of their behavior, but I could lose my good eye if I don't close it up now. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So a little word from our sponsors here. For more information about upcoming sessions, please visit rkdgroup.com/webinars. And join us next time. We're all very excited about this. Sir Chris Weiland, one of our outstanding creative directors, will be refreshing us with the craft of captivating videos that engage your donors. Don't miss it. That's going to be May 18th, 1:30 p.m. Central. I hope I got that right. CTD Central. And thank you, everybody. It was a real pleasure being with you here, and I'll see you out there on the World Wide Web.